Amusement parks are supposed to feel exciting, but everything changes after closing time. Story 1. The padlock on the side gate of Wonder World was rusted through, giving way with a pathetic, metallic groan that sounded deafening in the stillness of 2 a.m. I shouldn't have been there, but the dare and the cheap thrill of trespassing had pulled me in like a moth to a street lamp. Once inside, the magic of the daytime amusement park curdled into something grotesque. Without the thrum of crowds and the canned, upbeat music, the park felt like a carcass stripped of its meat. The Ferris wheel loomed overhead, a skeletal titan silhouetted against the bruised purple of the night sky. One of the passenger cars creaked rhythmically, swaying in a breeze I couldn't feel. Squeak, thump, squeak, thump. It sounded like a slow, labored heartbeat. I walked down the midway, my flashlight beam cutting a frantic path through the gloom. The stalls, once vibrant with primary colors, looked like rotting teeth. A row of stuffed animal prizes hung limp from their ropes, their synthetic fur matted and damp with dew. Their glass eyes seemed to reflect my flashlight with a predatory glint. I kept my gaze forward, but I could feel them. Hundreds of plastic, unblinking stares tracking my movement. The silence was the worst part. It wasn't empty. It was heavy, expectant. Every few paces, I'd stop to listen to the click-clack of a loose cable slapping against a pole, or the distant wet rustle of something dragging itself through the tall, unkempt weeds near the tilt-a-whirl. I reached the House of Mirrors, a fun house that had been shuttered for a decade. The front facade, a giant, grinning clown face, was peeling, the paint bubbling like diseased skin. I didn't mean to look, but I did. Through the cracked glass of the entrance, I saw my own reflection, distorted and warped. But as I took a step back, my reflection didn't mimic me. The mirrored version of me remained standing still, its eyes wide, its hand pressed against the glass from the inside. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I backed away, my breath hitching in my chest. Paranoia, I told myself. Just exhaustion. But then, a sound echoed from deep within the house. A wet, bubbling giggle that sounded like a throat full of bile. I scrambled backward, spinning around to bolt back toward the gate. The park, which had seemed empty moments ago, now felt claustrophobic. Every ride, every dark tent, seemed to be leaning in, narrowing the path. Shadows shifted in the periphery of my vision, too tall, too fluid to be human. I didn't stop running until I hit the perimeter fence, my lungs burning and my skin crawling with the unmistakable sensation of being hunted. As I vaulted over the wire, I caught one last glimpse of the park. The Ferris wheel had started to turn. It wasn't powered by electricity. It was moving with a slow, grinding friction, as if being pulled by the weight of something clinging to the cars. And from the darkness behind me, the merry-go-round music began to play, distorted, slow, and impossibly loud. Story 2. The Midnight Midway wasn't a ride. It was a dare. By the time I vaulted the rusting chain-link fence, the moon had been swallowed by thick, bruising clouds. The park, once a cacophony of sugary screams and calliope music, was now a tomb of skeletal steel and rotting plywood. My flashlight beam cut a shivering path through the gloom. It caught the faces of painted fiberglass clowns, their grins peeled back by decades of decay, revealing jagged, wooden teeth. Every crunch of gravel beneath my boots sounded like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. I headed for the Ferris wheel. It stood against the horizon like a giant, broken clock. As I approached, the air grew unnaturally cold, carrying the copper scent of old blood and stagnant grease. Then, the sound started. A low, rhythmic thrum. It wasn't the wind. It was the moan of rusted gears being forced into motion. I stopped dead, One of the passenger gondolas, 20 feet above, began to sway. Then a second. The thrum deepened into a grinding shriek of metal on metal that vibrated in my very marrow. I swung my light upward, but the beam died, flickering out with a harsh, terminal pop. Panic, cold and sharp, hooked into my stomach. I turned to retreat, but the shadows between the funhouse stalls seemed to stretch, thickening into shapes that lacked human geometry. I heard footsteps, wet, heavy, like bare feet slapping against damp asphalt, trailing just a few paces behind me. I forced myself to walk, then run. The park felt hungry. The skeletal remains of the roller coaster groaned, the wooden tracks shivering as if something were crawling along them in the dark. Every time I looked back, the path I had just traversed seemed to lengthen, the familiar ticket booths and game stalls repositioning themselves like shifting teeth in a closing jaw. I reached the fence, my breath coming in ragged, freezing gasps. My fingers clawed at the chain link, but as I climbed, a hand, long, pale, and impossibly cold, brushed the back of my neck. I didn't turn around. I vaulted the fence, limbs flailing, and hit the pavement of the parking lot on the other side. As I sprinted for my car, I risked one final glance back. In the center of the midway, the Ferris wheel was turning. It moved with a smooth, terrifying speed, the gondolas creaking in a dissonant, mocking melody. And under the faint, dying glow of a faulty security light, I saw them. Figures standing in line, waiting for their turn, their faces smooth, blank surfaces beneath the sagging canvas of the night. I started my engine, but the radio crackled to life, static giving way to the frantic, distorted sound of a calliope organ playing a song that hadn't been heard in 30 years. I didn't look back again. I drove until the sun rose, but even now, in the quiet of my own home, I can still feel the phantom sensation of those cold, dead fingers resting against my skin.